A Melody in Madrid by Everett Cole. April 1837, Madrid, Spain. The strings of the violin sang beneath Isabella Montalvo's fingers, filling the air with melancholy notes that seemed to dance through the grand ballroom. Her eyes remained closed as she played, shutting out the aristocratic audience that had gathered in the Alvarez mansion. For these precious moments, she existed only in the music. Isabella felt rather than saw her father's approving nod from the corner where he stood with his cello. Diego Montalvo had once been the most celebrated musician in Madrid, until age and arthritis had begun to claim his once nimble fingers. Now it fell to his daughter to earn their living through performances at society gatherings. As the final note lingered in the air, Isabella opened her eyes to polite applause. The Marquis de Alvarez nodded approvingly, his wife dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Yet it was the tall figure standing near the terrace doors that caught Isabella's attention. A man who was not clapping but watching her with an intensity that made her flush. "Magnificent Señorita Montalvo," the Marquis said, approaching her with an outstretched hand. "Your reputation does not do justice to your talent." Isabella curtsied. "You are too kind, Your Excellency." "Allow me to introduce our distinguished guest," the Marquis continued, gesturing to the man by the terrace. "Lord James Harrington, recently arrived from England. He has expressed particular interest in Spanish music." Lord Harrington stepped forward, and Isabella noted his impeccable attire, clearly the work of London's finest tailors. His dark hair was cropped shorter than was fashionable among Spanish gentlemen, and his eyes, a startling shade of blue, stood out against his sun-bronzed skin. "Señorita Montalvo," he said, his Spanish flawless though marked by a distinctly English accent. "Your performance was extraordinary. Particularly the piece by Boccherini, you captured its essence perfectly." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "You know Boccherini's work, my lord?" "I spent considerable time in Italy before coming to Spain," he replied with a slight smile. "Music is a passion of mine, though I claim no talent for it myself." "James is being modest," the Marquis interjected. "He studied musical composition at Oxford before embarking on his diplomatic career." Isabella found herself curious about this Englishman who spoke of music with such understanding. Most of her father's patrons appreciated their performances as mere entertainment, pleasant background for their social gatherings. "Perhaps, Señorita," Lord Harrington said, "you might consider playing something by Fernando Cernexт. His variations on a theme by Mozart is particularly challenging, but I suspect well within your capabilities." Isabella could not hide her surprise. "You know Sor's work?" "I had the pleasure of attending one of his concerts in London some years ago." The evening proceeded with Isabella performing several more pieces, including the Sor composition Lord Harrington had suggested. Throughout her playing, she felt his eyes upon her, not with the typical assessment of a man viewing a woman, but with genuine appreciation for her artistry. As the guests began to depart, Isabella and her father carefully packed away their instruments. The night had been profitable. The Marquis was known for his generosity, but Isabella's thoughts remained fixed on the enigmatic Englishman, who had disappeared from the ballroom without bidding her farewell. "You played beautifully tonight," her father said as their carriage rattled through Madrid's narrow streets toward their modest home in the musicians' quarter. "The Englishman knew Sor's work," Isabella replied, still surprised. "Few people recognize it, even among musicians." Diego smiled. "Lord Harrington is not merely a diplomat, Isabella. He is a collector of musical manuscripts. The Marquis told me he has traveled across Europe acquiring rare scores." "A collector?" Her interest was piqued further. "What is he doing in Madrid?" "Official business for the British Crown, I believe. But the Marquis mentioned he's been seeking Spanish compositions for his collection." Isabella fell silent, thinking of the trunk beneath her bed that contained her grandfather's musical manuscripts, compositions never published, their beauty known only to the Montalvo family. She had often wondered if they might be worth something, but her father was reluctant to part with them. The carriage stopped before their whitewashed house, humble compared to the grand palaces they visited to perform but respectable for musicians. As Isabella helped her father down, she noticed a carriage waiting nearby, an elegant vehicle with a coat of arms painted on its door. "Señorita Montalvo," a voice called. Lord Harrington stepped from the shadows, removing his hat. "Forgive this intrusion, but I wish to speak with you about a matter of some importance." Diego Montalvo stiffened beside her. "My lord, it is late, and we have had a long evening." "Of course, and I apologize," Lord Harrington said quickly. "I would not disturb you without good reason. May I call tomorrow? there is a proposition I wish to discuss regarding musical manuscripts. Isabella felt her pulse quicken. How did you know about our manuscripts? Lord Harrington smiled. I didn't. But I suspected a family with such musical talent might possess treasures beyond their instruments. Might I come tomorrow afternoon? Say at 2 o'clock. Diego and Isabella exchanged glances. Very well, her father agreed with reluctance. Tomorrow at 2. As Lord Harrington bowed and returned to his carriage, Isabella couldn't help but wonder what this proposition might entail, and why the thought of seeing the Englishman again sent a flutter through her stomach that had nothing to do with business. The following afternoon, Isabella found herself unnecessarily adjusting the simple blue dress she had chosen to wear. Their maid, Carmela, had already served refreshments in the small parlor, arranging almond cakes and sherry on their best porcelain. You look lovely, daughter, Diego said, noting her nervousness, though I remind you that Lord Harrington's visit concerns business, not courtship. Isabella flushed. I am well aware, father. I simply wish to present ourselves properly to such a distinguished visitor. Diego's eyes twinkled with amusement. Of course, that explains why you've changed your dress 3 times. Before Isabella could retort, a knock sounded at the door. Carmela admitted Lord Harrington, who entered carrying a leather portfolio. Señor Montalvo, señorita, he greeted them with a bow. Thank you for receiving me. Please be seated. Diego gestured to an armchair. Carmela, pour our guests some sherry. Lord Harrington accepted the glass with thanks but seemed eager to discuss his purpose. As I mentioned yesterday, I am a collector of musical manuscripts, particularly those of Spanish and Italian composers. During your performance, I recognized not only technical brilliance but interpretive choices that suggested familiarity with original compositions. Isabella exchanged a glance with her father. My grandfather was a composer, she explained. We have preserved his works and occasionally perform them. Lord Harrington leaned forward, his interest visible. Antonio Montalvo? Diego's eyebrows rose. You know of my father's work? By reputation only. I have been searching for his compositions for years. It is said he studied under Boccherini himself and developed a unique style that blended Italian technique with Spanish folk influences. Isabella felt a surge of pride. Her grandfather had died before her birth, but she had grown up playing his music, feeling connected to him through the notes he had written. May I ask what manuscripts you possess? Lord Harrington continued. Diego nodded to Isabella, who rose and left the room, returning moments later with a worn leather trunk. From it, she carefully extracted several bound volumes of music, their pages yellowed but the ink still clear. These are his string quartets, she explained, placing them on the table, and these are sonatas for violin and piano. The remaining volumes contain various works, some unfinished. Lord Harrington's hands hovered over the manuscripts, his expression reverent. May I? At Diego's nod, he gently opened one volume, his fingers tracing the notes as though they were precious jewels. Extraordinary, he murmured. The complexity of these passages, it's unlike anything I've seen from this period. Isabella watched him, surprised by the genuine appreciation in his eyes. You truly understand the music. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Music was my first love, Señorita Montalvo. Diplomacy merely pays for my passion. For several hours they discussed the manuscripts, with Isabella occasionally demonstrating passages on her violin. Lord Harrington revealed a depth of musical knowledge that impressed even Diego, who had spent his life among musicians. As the afternoon light began to fade, Lord Harrington finally addressed the purpose of his visit. Señor Montalvo, I would like to purchase these manuscripts for my collection. Diego's expression closed. They are not for sale, my lord. They are our family's legacy. I understand your reluctance, Lord Harrington said. But consider this, kept here, they remain unknown to the world. In my collection, they would be preserved professionally, studied by scholars, perhaps even published. Your father's genius deserves recognition. Isabella saw her father wavering. The manuscripts were precious to them, but Lord Harrington's words about recognition resonated. Antonio Montalvo had died in obscurity, his brilliance acknowledged only by family and a small circle of musicians. What would you offer? Diego asked finally. Lord Harrington named a sum that made Isabella gasp. It was enough to secure their livelihood for years, perhaps even to purchase the small country villa Diego had always dreamed of. I cannot decide this today, Diego said. We must consider carefully. Of course. Lord Harrington rose. I shall remain in Madrid for a month. Take all the time you need. He turned to Isabella. I have another proposition, if I may. The British ambassador is hosting a musical evening next week. Would you consider performing? Your fee would be substantial, and it would offer an opportunity to introduce your grandfather's work to influential society. Isabella looked to her father, who nodded slightly. I would be honored, she replied. Excellent. I shall send a carriage for you. Lord Harrington bowed over her hand, his fingers warm against hers. Until then, Senorita Montalvo? After he departed, Isabella stood by the window, watching his tall figure disappear down the street. He is unlike any Englishman I've met, she mused. Indeed, her father agreed. And he looks at you with more than musical interest. Isabella turned, surprised. Surely not. Men of his station do not seriously pursue musicians' daughters. Diego patted her hand. Perhaps not. But be careful, Isabella. Your heart may not understand such distinctions. The British embassy gleamed with candlelight, its ballroom transformed for the musical evening. Isabella waited in a small antechamber, adjusting the emerald gown she had splurged on for the occasion. Her father had remained home with a troublesome cough, insisting she perform alone. You look exquisite, came Lord Harrington's voice from the doorway. Isabella turned, surprised by his presence and the warmth in his eyes. Thank you, my lord. I hope my performance will meet expectations. I have no doubt it will exceed them. He stepped closer. I have arranged for you to play your grandfather's sonata in D minor. The ambassador has already expressed interest in the program. She stared at him. But I haven't agreed to showcase my grandfather's work. Forgive me if I presumed, he said, looking genuinely contrite. I thought it would be a fitting tribute, but we can change the program if you prefer. Isabella hesitated, then shook her head. No, you're right. My grandfather would have wanted his music heard in such a setting. Lord Harrington smiled, relief evident in his expression. There is something compelling about your family's connection to music, Senorita. It transcends the mere playing of notes. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the ambassador's secretary announcing it was time. Lord Harrington offered his arm, leading her into the ballroom where society's elite had gathered. As Isabella played, she felt a curious liberation. The manuscript before her, her grandfather's own handwriting, seemed to speak directly to her soul. Each note rang true, each phrase built upon the last with mathematical precision yet emotional depth. When she finished, the silence lasted several heartbeats before the room erupted in applause. The ambassador himself approached, commending her performance and inquiring about the composer. Antonio Montalvo, Lord Harrington explained before Isabella could speak. A sadly overlooked genius of Spanish composition. Throughout the evening, Isabella found herself the center of attention, not merely as a performer but as the bearer of a newly discovered musical legacy. Several patrons expressed interest in hearing more of her grandfather's work, and one music publisher requested a meeting. You have caused quite a sensation, Lord Harrington observed as he escorted her to the carriage at evening's end. Your grandfather's music has found its audience at last. Isabella studied his profile in the moonlight. Why did you do this? Surely these manuscripts hold little commercial value compared to works by more renowned composers. He was silent for a moment. Not everything valuable can be measured in pounds sterling, Senorita. Some treasures must be shared for their own sake. You still wish to purchase them? I do. But more importantly, I wish to see them published, performed, recognized. Your playing tonight, it brought those notes to life in a way no other musician could achieve. The carriage stopped before her home, but Lord Harrington made no move to depart after helping her down. Instead, he stood before her in the quiet street, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. Isabella, he said, using her given name for the first time, I find myself in a difficult position. I came to Madrid for diplomatic reasons and to acquire musical treasures. I did not expect to discover a treasure of a different sort. Her breath caught. My lord? James, he corrected softly. After tonight, all of Madrid will be speaking of your talent. You could have a career throughout Europe if you wished it. I would be honored to help facilitate such opportunities. Isabella sensed there was more he wished to say, but he stepped back, bowing formally. Forgive me. It grows late and I've kept you too long. May I call on you tomorrow? She nodded, unable to articulate the confusing emotions swirling within her. As she watched his carriage depart, Isabella acknowledged the truth of her father's warning. Her heart, indeed, did not understand the distinctions of station that separated a Spanish musician from an English lord. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Isabella's performance at the embassy had sparked interest in her grandfather's compositions, leading to invitations to play at several prominent salons. Lord Harrington, James, as he now insisted she call him, attended each performance, his presence both comforting and unsettling. "You've received another invitation," Diego announced over breakfast, waving a sealed note. "The Duchess of Alcantara requests your presence at her musical soirée next Thursday." Isabella took the note, recognizing the elaborate wax seal of one of Madrid's most exclusive hostesses. This is because of James's influence. Her father raised an eyebrow at her use of Lord Harrington's given name but made no comment on it. "Perhaps. But your talent has earned these opportunities. The question remains, what shall we do about the manuscripts?" It was the question that had hovered between them for weeks. Lord Harrington's offer remained open, but Diego had been unable to decide whether to part with his father's legacy. "I've been thinking," Isabella said carefully. "What if we don't sell them outright? What if we arrange for them to be published instead? James knows publishers in London who specialize in musical scores." Diego considered this. "Publication would ensure your grandfather's name continues on, but it would not provide the immediate funds that Lord Harrington's offer would." "We could negotiate rights to the published works," Isabella suggested, "and I could continue to perform. My fees have already increased since the embassy concert." Their discussion was interrupted by Carmela announcing Lord Harrington's arrival. He entered with his customary grace but appeared somewhat preoccupied. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, accepting the seat Diego offered. "I've come with news that may interest you both." Isabella noticed a certain tension in his manner. "What is it?" "I've received a dispatch from London. I'm being recalled to England, rather urgently it seems. I must depart within the week." The news struck Isabella with unexpected force. "So soon? I thought you were to remain in Madrid for at least another month." James's eyes met hers briefly. "So did I. Diplomatic necessities often disrupt personal plans." He turned to Diego. "I must know your decision about the manuscripts before I leave. If you choose not to sell, I would still like to arrange for their publication in London." Diego glanced at his daughter, noting her distress. "Perhaps Isabella and I might discuss this privately and provide you with an answer tomorrow?" "Of course." James rose, hesitating before adding, "There is a matter I would like to discuss with Señorita Montalvo alone, if I may. Perhaps a turn in the garden?" Diego nodded his permission, and Isabella led James through the small house to the walled garden at the rear, a modest space filled with potted geraniums and a single orange tree. Once they were alone, James seemed to struggle for words, an unusual state for the typically eloquent diplomat. "Isabella, these past weeks have been transformative. I came to Madrid seeking musical treasures but found something far more precious." She felt her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. "James, please, allow me to finish. I must return to England, my duty demands it. But I find I cannot leave without telling you." He took her hands in his. "I have developed feelings for you that go far beyond admiration for your musical talent." Isabella's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you. That despite the differences in our circumstances, I cannot imagine returning to England without you." She stood frozen, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "You cannot mean marriage," he said firmly. "I am asking you to be my wife, Isabella. To come to England with me, to bring your grandfather's music to London's concert halls, to share your life with mine." Isabella withdrew her hands, turning away to gather her scattered thoughts. "You cannot know what you're proposing. I am a musician, the daughter of a cellist, your world." "My world could use more music and passion," he interrupted, "and less concern for social distinctions that have no true meaning. Your family would never accept me." James laughed softly. "My family has learned to accept my unconventional choices. My brother married an Italian opera singer last year, much to my mother's initial horror and eventual delight." Isabella turned back to him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. "And my father? I cannot leave him. He would be welcome in our home. I have a country estate with excellent acoustics in the music room, designed by an Italian architect who understood the importance of sound. Your father could continue teaching, playing, preserving your family's musical heritage." The vision he painted was seductive, a life devoted to music, to love, to family. Yet Isabella hesitated, aware of all she would leave behind. "I need time to consider," she said finally. "This is unexpected." James nodded, disappointment visible in his eyes but respect in his demeanor. Of course. But we have little time before my departure. I sail from Cadiz on Saturday morning. I will have an answer for you tomorrow, she promised, for both the manuscripts and the other matter. That night, Isabella barely slept, her mind filled with conflicting thoughts. By morning, she had reached a decision, one that required courage but felt right in her heart. When James arrived the following afternoon, both Isabella and Diego were waiting in the parlor. The manuscripts lay on the table between them, carefully bound and organized. "We have made our decision," Diego announced. "We will not sell the manuscripts." James's expression fell, but he nodded with acceptance. "I understand. They are your family's legacy." "However," Isabella continued, "we propose an alternative. My father will remain in Madrid to oversee the cataloging and copying of the manuscripts. The copies will be sent to London for publication under your guidance, with proceeds shared between your collection and our family." James looked between them, understanding dawning. "And you, Isabella, what have you decided?" She stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have decided to accept your proposal, both musical and matrimonial. I will accompany you to England, with my father to join us once his work here is complete." The joy that transformed James's features told Isabella all she needed to know about the rightness of her decision. Diego watched them with misty eyes, recognizing the harmony in their union, a duet of different backgrounds but perfectly matched souls. "You are certain?" James asked, taking her hands in his. Isabella smiled, feeling as though all the notes of her life had finally resolved into a perfect cadence. "As certain as the next note follows the last in my grandfather's most beautiful compositions." As James drew her into his arms, Isabella knew that their love, like music itself, would transcend boundaries of nationality, class, and convention, creating a symphony all their own. Epilogue. The concert hall in London fell silent as Isabella Harrington lifted her violin to her shoulder. 2 years had passed since her departure from Madrid, years filled with changes both expected and surprising. Her marriage to James had caused a brief stir in London society, but her musical talent had quickly silenced any critics. In the front row sat her father, now residing permanently at the Harrington country estate, where he had established a small music school. Beside him was James, whose diplomatic career had been set aside in favor of managing their growing collection of rare musical manuscripts and organizing concerts throughout Europe. As Isabella began to play the opening notes of her grandfather's most ambitious composition, now published and acclaimed throughout musical circles, she felt a profound sense of rightness. The music that had once been known only to her family now filled grand concert halls, bringing Antonio Montalvo's genius to audiences he could never have imagined reaching. Love, like music, required both technical precision and emotional truth. Isabella had found both with James, a partnership of equals built on mutual respect and shared passion. Their differences had not divided them but enhanced their relationship, like complementary instruments in a well-crafted quartet. As the final notes of her grandfather's composition soared to the rafters, Isabella looked to James, whose expression reflected the same joy she felt, the perfect harmony of two souls who had found in each other their true counterpoint.